Welcome to Argon Co's webinar on how to drive a successful supply chain transformation program. We would like to extend a warm welcome to all of our audience, from senior to tactical leadership in supply chain, operations, procurement, and other fields. My name is Roberto Uding, and I will be your host for today. Before we start, I would like to ask you to switch off your microphone. I think we've already muted it. And if you have any questions during this webinar, please place them in the chat, and we will come back to you at the end of this webinar in the Q&A session. We will record this webinar and make a link available to all of you with the video recording in the coming weeks. And please be mindful that we will also use excerpts of this webinar for marketing purposes. Now that we got the technical stuff out of the way, for today's webinar, we start with an introduction on how to drive a successful supply chain transformation program from our productivity expert and Argon Co partner from the Amsterdam office, Frank Stieger. After this introduction, we will continue to an interview-style presentation moderated by our senior partner from the Amsterdam office, Willem de Wolf, and our special guest for today, Mr. Remon Tromp, who is the Senior Supply Chain Director EMEA at Cargill Cacao and Chocolate. After this session, we will conclude the webinar with a short Q&A session for which you can provide input at all times in the chat box. I will invite all the speakers back to the table for the final Q&A, with which we will close off then this webinar. I hope you will enjoy learning from the shared experience and methodologies. Without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Argon Co's Frank Stieger.
Thank you, Roberto. So welcome to this webinar. What I would like to do is to share with you a couple of insights about how to drive a successful supply chain transformation program. I want to talk about a couple of topics with you. So first of all, what is it? What is a supply chain transformation program? Second topic is, why do we need a structured approach? Then why do they rarely meet their ambition? So why do they often fail so often? Then I would like to share some insights about foundation of successful programs. And finally, we have defined 10 golden rules for successful transformation programs that I want to share with you. First of all, what is our definition of a transformation program? Basically what it is, it's a profound change that orients an organization in a new direction, achieving significantly higher levels of effectiveness. A lot of words, but basically what it is about involving people in a cross-functional manner. It is about improving processes. It is about looking at technology. And basically, at the end of the day, it is about having significantly better results. So that is really what a transformation program is for us. Some key phrases include, it's basically no going back, which means that once you started, you want to continue, and you want to finish, and you want to be successful. And also, it is about realizing a significant higher performance. It's not a minor improvement, it is a significant higher performance that you want to realize. So why do you need a structured approach to be successful in this? First of all, let me share a couple of insights that we see currently. We live in a very dynamic world. We call that VUCA, in a VUCA world, with a lot of changes, a lot of crises, a lot of technological disruptions or politically disruptions. Think of AI, the impact of AI. Think of the tariffs that we currently see. Think of the different regulations that constantly change. So it's complex, it's very dynamic. That of course makes it very difficult also to setting the direction, to define the strategy in that context. And on top of that, also the organizations themselves and the markets are getting more and more complex. Think of having global supply chains, having real-time access to big data, constantly changing regulations globally. So it's a very complex, uncertain world that we currently live in. And because of that, we need a very structured approach with regards to transformation programs. And what does that mean? Well, it means a couple of things. So it means because we live in a very volatile world, we need to understand the capabilities of our organization to be able to take advantage of changing circumstances. So what are the capabilities of your organization? Because we live in an uncertain world, we need to be very flexible in executing the strategy, because you constantly need to be able to adapt because of the changing environment. Because we live in a complex world, we should be able to define a clear end goal, a clear mission, a clear strategy. So it's clear for the business where to go to. And finally, because we live in an ambitious world, it takes courage to take a position and to make decisions. So because we live in such an uncertain, very dynamic world, the structure is very important to be successful in transformation programs. So why do they often fail? So on the left-hand side here, you see the results of a couple of studies. But basically, they talk about programs are often much more expensive than what was budgeted. They talk about not realizing the end goals. They talk about taking longer than planned. So the success rate of programs is not very high. Not high at all, actually. So why is that? Now, we at Argon Co, we conducted internal analysis, and we identified a couple of risk areas, 6 of them. So first of all, what we see, there's a very limited focus on results. At the end of the day, you want to realize results, but that's not always what we see in those programs. We see a lack of a shared vision. We also see a limited, or at least no ownership throughout the organization. We also see that change management is kind of neglected. So it's really regarded from a very technical perspective, but change management is at least as important. Also, the lack of sponsorship plays a big role. And finally, the involvement of process and technical expertise in the program. So this brings me to, let's say, the key foundations of being successful in transformation. And of course, they address the risk areas that we just identified. So first of all, you want to ensure the right sponsorship to make sure that you have the cross-functional buy-in, that you have the right level of support and resources that are needed in the program. So that's one. Second point is to have that shared vision. So do we have a common goal within the program? Do we have clear objective targets? And that culture of not going back, that I already mentioned earlier. Then thirdly, the focus on realizing results, getting results. So you want to have a business case for the program. You want to have a very structured program set up with the right priorities. And at the end of the day, you also want to constantly monitor and measure business results. Then point number 4, make sure that there's enough technical expertise. So you need to have the skilled people, capable teams, also with the right capacities and capabilities. You need to have internal experts, for instance, on key areas like AI or planning or what is relevant for your program. So that is important. Then real ownership is key. So involve people from all levels within your organization and make sure that the change is done with the operational teams and not to them. And if you do that, that ensures that the change that you want to realize is sustainable. And finally, the focus on the change. So realize it's a change journey. It's more than a technical program. It's a change journey. So you want to build momentum. You want to motivate people. And you do that by having clear and consistent communication and building a change community and build momentum. So those are the foundations of successful programs. And then finally, based upon all that we have seen so far, is what we have done. We have defined the 10 golden rules for successful transformation programs. And you can actually apply them yourself to assess to what extent are you ready for those kind of transformation programs. So I'll go over them quickly together with you. Number one is make sure you have a clear business ambition. It needs to be clear, what do you want to realize? What's your goal that you want to achieve at the end of the program? Number two is set guiding principles, basically to structure the overall program and have a clear roadmap in place that you can follow throughout the program. Number three is ensure you have the right sponsorship, budget management, and arbitration in place at top management level, of course. Number four is have strong PMO capabilities, because you want to manage cost, you want to manage time and resources. So that's critical. Number five is make sure that you have a structured project methodology. So whenever people start working on projects, they have a methodology that they can apply. We don't really care what kind of methodology, as long as you have one. Number six is you want to have expertise to basically to design processes. That's a skill in itself. So designing end state processes and solutions, that skill you want to have in-house in order to be successful. Do that with, number seven, do that with cross-functional team people from different functions with the appropriate capabilities and capacities. Number eight is, that's again talking about the business impact. You want to continuously monitor the business impact. So does your program actually realize the business impact, the business result that you want to see? Measure that. Then finally, have a strong change management plan in place, because that is at least as important as, let's say, the technical approach of the program. And then finally, use what we call outside-in transactional data, because that enables you to monitor how solid are your new processes, how robust are they, and it also enables you to see, do I see still improvement opportunities within those processes? So those 10 bullet points, those 10 golden transformation rules, you can actually apply yourself to assess, are we ready for such a program? And now let's take a look at the use case of Cargill to see how they applied it in their program.
Thank you, Frank, for this great introduction in how to drive this supply chain transformation program. Now we're going to start with the main lineup for today. I would like to welcome our main guest, Mr. Remon Tromp, who is the Senior Supply Chain Director, Cacao and Chocolate, Europe and West Africa for Cargill Food EMEA. And Remon, I know you started 15 years ago as a supply chain management trainee at Heineken. And during 8 years, basically, you developed from an operational line manager in the shifts towards the scheduling manager for the biggest brewery in Europe. You joined Cargill in 2017 as a planning manager for cocoa in Europe and gradually worked all the way up to your current role as Senior Director of Supply Chain for Cocoa and Chocolate Europe and West Africa. We know you're a strong advocate for continuous improvement, and you started, I think, with the TPM journey at Heineken up until the implementation of stable supply chain at Cargill. Remon will be interviewed by Argon Co senior partner Ad-Willem de Wolf on how to drive a successful supply chain transformation program, and Ad-Willem was involved in the governance of this program. So, without further ado, I would like to invite both of you to the table and enlighten us.
Okay, Remon, welcome in the studio, a different environment than where we usually can be found, right? But before we get to the program, maybe you can share something about Cargill first.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's indeed a different environment than we are used to have contact with each other. But it's my pleasure to tell you a bit about the journey that we embarked together. But on the question, so Cargill is a family-owned company that is committed to deliver food and ingredients and agricultural solutions to nourish the world in a safe and responsible way. And basically, we sit at the heart of the agricultural supply chain, partnering with producers, often in origin, up until the customers we source for. And we are doing this for over 159 years with more than 150,000 employees globally. And the company consists out of three big enterprises. So we have our food enterprise, where I'm part of. We have our agricultural and trading business, and we have our specialized portfolio.
Okay, and can you share something more in particular of what the business is that you are involved in and what your area of scope of work is?
Yeah, so as mentioned, we are split in three different enterprises, and I am, together with my team, part of the food group in EMEA. And within that group, we manage the cocoa and chocolate supply chain from bean to bar. So basically, we are taking care of getting the beans in from origin up until the moment we deliver our products and our delicious chocolate to our customers in Europe. And as most of the beans are sourced from West Africa, it's also distributed via our supply chain organization in EMEA. So for that reason, we are managing an international system of 17 plants from origin in Ivory Coast and Ghana up until processing facilities in Europe. And on top of that, the team in Europe and Ivory Coast and Ghana is also managing the bean and product supply to other regions where Cargill cocoa and chocolate is active.
Okay, thank you. And before we go into the details of the program, can you first describe something about the program and the process scope so that people that participate in the webinar have an understanding of your supply chain?
Yeah, so the reason why we started this program is because a lot of things change at the moment in the global market, and for that reason, also our priorities changed a bit. So on the one hand, interest rates went up. So although they are going down a bit now, but when we started it was highly up, and this results in a higher cost of working capital. And our business is really working capital intense because of the beans. Cocoa beans are pretty expensive. So that really changed the ball game for how we manage this business together. And for that reason, we decided to focus on working capital reduction. But this is not so easy to actually reduce because we have a really lengthy supply chain. As said, it starts with buying the beans up until you deliver chocolate basically to bakeries. So we needed to find a different way, and there we decided to focus on lead time and to use that as an indicator to, in the end, drive down working capital. And the rationale behind it is if you reduce your lead time, inventory comes available, which reduces, and that inventory you can sell off. And then in the end, you reduce your working capital usage.
Okay, and why was that program so important to you? You mentioned some reasons behind it, but why was it important for Cargill as a company?
Yeah, as said, so on top of the fact that working capital in general became more important, it was also the case that the prices of cocoa went up significantly, and that also the crop was down, mainly driven by a changing climate and diseases in origin. So we had to manage that, and as we all know, the global container market was also not that stable. So you really need to if you want to keep delivering your customers, you need to make sure that you are in control of that chain.
Okay. Hey, and before we go into how you manage the program, let's start with the results. So what was your major achievement that you can share in this webinar? What did you achieve?
Yeah. So the goal we had to reduce working capital, that's what we achieved. And in the same time, it came with significant cost reduction as slipstream effect. You can imagine if you're lead time, if you have a lot of inventory on the ocean, you also have the risk on demurrage. But to make that more specifically, the lead time of our products, we sliced that by half. So which is a pretty amazing result. Yeah. And yeah, it was not one big step we made. It was a journey of targeted small improvements that really led to this step change in our end-to-end supply chain. And we really were able to connect the teams in origin in West Africa, Ivory Coast and Ghana, with the teams in Europe to jointly manage those stock levels and the lead time, and set actions together. And by doing that, it was not anymore that every department handed off the relay stick. No, it was one team that tried to run the business with the lowest possible stock.
Okay. I'm sure there have been many challenges, but what was your biggest challenge to achieve this working capital reduction?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge in such a lengthy supply chain is that you are not owning it all yourself. So we are working together with over 20 partners on the one hand that are the container carriers, external warehouses, forwarders. So due to this, you have limited data availability and limited transparency on that whole chain. So the biggest challenge was to figure out in which part of our end-to-end chain we lost the majority of the lead time. And the majority of what I basically mean to say is that you need to understand where your biggest spread is of your lead time, in which part of the chain, and therefore you need to have the data, and the data was available sometimes with container carriers, sometimes with us. But how do you make sure that all that data is combined into one overview that you can utilize to have the right conversation?
Okay. So once you had the data, how did you make that data work? How did you do that?
Yeah, that was a bit of an iterative process. Because in the end, the first step is to figure out what is going well and where do you have an opportunity. So at one point we figured out, because there you could also use the data of the big carriers, that as soon as a container is on the ocean, we were okay. Because then it's picked up by the carrier and brought to the port of destination. Right. And our warehouses were already using the data from the big carriers, so they knew when containers were coming. So we understood that our biggest deviation was from the moment we produced the product or when we got the beans up until it was on a ship. And to really understand what was going on there, we decided to implement the daily stand-up with our colleagues in Ghana and Ivory Coast. And by tracking each container, we could identify root cause when we were delayed. And mainly in Ghana, that focus and that discussion on every container led to a reduction of the lead time by itself, because they had the focus. But what we also saw is that in Ivory Coast, there was a bit of an improvement, but there we were lacking a bit. And so there we discussed it with the teams, really went into the details. And what we discovered is that there is one big difference between how we work in Ghana and Ivory Coast. So in Ivory Coast, we manage the export process ourselves. But in Ghana, we have that outsourced. And when you then look into your processes, your ways of working and the way the system's set up, we understood that was not properly covered.
Okay.
So together with the teams in Europe, our data team and the team in Ivory Coast, we established a new way of working, really incorporated the actual flow of our products in that country. And by doing that, we were able step by step to really drive it down and to utilize the data available to monitor our performance.
Okay. And so you got nice results. You made significant steps through data insights and actions. But once you get the results, the continuation of those results, the sustainability, if you like, of the results is always a challenge. So how did you organize for this to make sure that your leadership was involved?
Yeah, so as mentioned earlier, we started with following up on a container level. So we organized weekly stand-ups with the local teams. But on top of that, we organized a monthly setting where we involved all supply chain managers across the region. And there we didn't look at the performance per container, but there we started to look at the trends. So if we thought that we eliminated a root cause, we expected that the trend was going down. If that was the case, okay, we could step on to the next one. If that was not the case, you can zoom out a bit and you can try to understand what happened. But in the same time, it also gives you an opportunity to take some preventive measures. So for example, if the containers on the K in origin go up, then you see that happening and you can work across the across the supply chain to arrange extra availability on a container ship, and then in the same time increase your inbound capacity to prevent additional cost.
And by the sounds of it, it sounds logical, but how easy was this really? Because people always have to go through a change in these types of programs. So how easy or difficult was it for that matter?
Yeah. So you are already giving the answer a bit, because in theory it's really simple. It's moving products from A to B. But practice shows something else, is especially when you have a lot of handoff points, and there is also where we put a lot of effort in together with you and your team to coach my managers and also the middle layer of the organization, and train them how to have the right conversation, but also create that accountability with them, that they really feel accountable for what they are doing. And this also, there was a bit of a shift in our organization, a fundamental one, where we moved from a supply and demand driven business towards an inventory driven business. And it required full support from the business leadership team. So I had lots of conversations also with them, and we involved them in the project. But it also required a bit of a different way of organizing ourselves, because in the past, the local supply chain teams were reporting to the commercial manager. And back then that made sense because it was all about securing as much beans as possible. But we made a change as part of this program,
Right,
to make those teams part of our end-to-end supply chain to drive efficiency and contribute to that inventory-driven mindset.
Yeah. So it sounds easy, but it involves quite a bit. If summarize. And if we go to the next question, because I know because of my involvement, there were lots of initiatives throughout this chain that had to be managed, that we were running in parallel. So how did you ensure that you were running it as one program?
Yeah, so I think where we started with is that we identified one internal program manager that took care of the overall coordination of the program. So the program consisted out of different pillars. Some were focused on data, others on ways of working, and another one on connecting the different departments together. But that program manager was the glue in the entire approach. And from day one, that program manager was also coached by an experienced Argon consultant to really make sure that we set the program manager up for success and to challenge the status quo. And within the group that were, it's not officially reporting, but that indirectly reported to the program manager, we made sure that we had a shipment manager in Ivory Coast, for example, but also the warehouse manager in Europe. And so that you really have that.
The full chain covered.
Indeed.
Okay. Hey, and Frank was talking about sponsorship and the introduction of this webinar. So what was your personal involvement in the program?
Yeah, so first of all, where it started is to challenge the status quo, and that had also in the organization that we could achieve something differently, but in the same time being a big advocate and believer that the change was possible. that it was possible to do it. So there it started with. But in order to do that, and that's why we brought Argon on board, you need a bit of mass or a bit of change management capability to have a ripple effect through the entire organization. So it was to summarize it a bit. It started with believe it yourself, challenge it yourself, but also bring some capabilities in that help you to start moving mountains. And it also meant for myself, and this is a bit the way I work, that I wanted to understand it myself so that I could ask the right questions. And by this, you are also showing to the rest of the business how important it is. And perhaps because as a leader, this is always difficult. So on the one hand, you need to challenge the status quo, but you also need to celebrate success. And that's, I think, where we found a good middle ground, where sometimes we prepared a meeting and that we agreed together that Argon was asking some content-related difficult questions,
Right.
so that I could focus more on also celebrating the success, to have that right balance between challenging the status quo and
those
celebrate.
things that came from the program.
Indeed.
Yeah. So that's on your involvement. But we were also talking about the amount of change that is required. So how did you manage the change of this program? Because there was some change to manage, I know.
There was lots of change to manage. It was also, I think, in the whole industry is working like we were working before. So as mentioned, it starts with understanding the problem yourself and having the conviction. But the first thing I did together with the program manager was to fly over to Ivory Coast and Ghana and to start every step in our supply chain myself and together with the program manager. And on the one hand, this helps you to have that substance, that detailed knowledge to coach your team, but it also builds trust on the ground that you actually want to understand what's going on.
Right.
And also because we wanted to have a change in the way we are organized, it gave also trust to the managers, the sending managers who were responsible for the team, that the team was in good hands because I did care.
Yeah. We already spoke about the challenge on the data and connecting the data across the chain, but I'm sure you had some other challenges that were more that you didn't expect, or things that were more difficult than anticipated. Can you share some of these examples that you learned during the journey?
I think the biggest challenge, and also what I had to learn, is on the one hand, it's about failing fast, which means that you get started and learn by doing. But in the same time, you want to implement a structural change in the organization and the way we operate. So you also need sometimes really some substance in going into the details to understand it and to make a bigger impact. And to find that balance between some quick wins and step changes, I think that was difficult. In the end, we managed it. And the second thing, which is a challenge in general, is you cannot do this alone. And you cannot do this only with your leadership team. So you need to enable that middle layer of managers to have that rhythm and rigor of stable supply chain. And there is where you as consultants came in and also helped us to support us to coach and to educate the middle layer of the organization, but in the same time, made clear you are not here forever. So we also need to start doing it ourselves, and sometimes that feels uncomfortable, but that's the change where you need to go through, and that is needed to develop your team so that you can run this yourself.
Okay. And you mentioned already Argon a couple of times, but what was for you most pivotal in our involvement in of course, achieving success of the program?
Yeah, I think what was pivotal is that we work together as partners instead of hiring a traditional consultant managing a program for us. And due to the fact that we work more as partners, we had best of both worlds. Because on the one hand, you have some brains and hands to break through the silos and also bring expertise on methodology and analytics. But it's also something that you are driving together. So you can bring in and you can unlock that potential that's already present in your team. And of course, the deep knowledge they have of their supply chain. They are the experts of the supply chain. And you guys are the experts on the way to drive change in certain programs. And so in summary, we set the direction together and we really execute it as partners to deliver the best result for Cargill.
Okay, thank you, Remon. I was keeping an eye on the time. Let's go to our last question. We're here with in the webinar with other supply chain directors. So what would be your best advice to them if they would like to start their transformation journey in the organization, supply chain organization?
Yeah, so I just heard what Frank said that we need to have. So I hope that this comes a bit close and that it's not contradicting. But I think, and that's also where I started with. The most important thing is that you understand the details and the goals yourself. And that in the organization, you are perceived as a true believer of the journey. And so that people start to follow you. But that you also actively support your team so that they can actually follow you. So that's one. Secondly is establish a group around you that can see the bigger picture. So that is able to zoom out to see the purpose of the program. So that you are driving it with a group and not on yourself. Be specific in what you do and what you don't do. The pitfall is to do everything because everything seems to be important. But that's, it could have a negative influence that you are stuck too long on something that's not going to move the needle. And last but not least, determine what kind of support you need, if you need support, and discuss that specifically with the consultants you intend to bring on board, because that's actually what I truly appreciated in the way we work together is the open dialogue to capture your knowledge and expertise, but in the same time make sure that we deliver those results that we needed as a company. And I think that was the reason why we were able to really slice it by half, the lead time, because that's pretty
what the outcome was. Well, great, Remon. It was nice to hear your summary in about half an hour journey, which lasted over a year. It was a nice journey to be in together. So let's wrap up this part of the session, and I will be handing over back to Roberto. Thanks, Remon.
Thanks.
So yeah, Frank, you also here. Great. Let's see our audience. If you have any questions to Frank or Remon, please put them in the chat area. I see that it's still that we still have a little bit of time for that. So if you have any questions, just put them in the chat area. And maybe we can already start with the first question to Frank. Frank, we talk a lot about making things cross-functional and practical in supply chains. So how do you get people to work across their business lines and get them involved in a cross-functional manner?
Yeah. Thanks for the question. I think a nice example is, I think you call it daily stand-ups, we call it IDEX, whatever the name is. But it is really to sit together with a team to monitor your process based upon data. And to see, do you see deviations from what you want to see, basically? And then the second question is, do you understand why there are the deviations? And that's what you do on a daily basis. So you want to improve, basically, at the end of the day, you want to improve your processes. And what is nice about it is, first of all, you do it data-based, but it is very much also cross-functionally, because in order to be successful in a process, you need to work as a cross-functional team. So as a cross-functional team, you look at the same process, of course, and you sit together and you start understanding why is it performing or why is it not performing. And that's, we feel, a very practical way to get it started.
Yeah.
To sit together as a cross-functional team and to work in your supply chain.
Yeah. And maybe, Remon, you could just, I know you talked about a little bit, you flew yourself to Ivory Coast in Ghana. And what is, just for the audience, what was the difference that you saw there?
Yeah. So to be clear, I didn't fly myself. Not the so we're not the pilot, but no. I think the biggest insight I had is that from a European perspective, you are a bit in a bubble. So you know your process, and you know that when you are in step A, you can do B, C, and D. And basically, also in Ivory Coast, they really know how their process works.
Yeah.
Only their process is not linear. It goes a bit back and forth, and it's less easy. For example, if it's raining, sometimes the roads are flooded and you cannot go to the port. And I think what really helped to go there is to understand that we need to trust more on the knowledge they have on their supply chain, and make sure that you embed that in the way you work together. And it's a bit like you are saying, it's not one team handing off a relay stick to another team. It's really the cross-functional
Exactly.
collaboration.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And Remon, you also talked about, failing fast, and then you get started and learn by doing. Can you give an example of, what failed and how did you get it back on track?
I think when we started this program, one of the first questions I asked to the team is, I just want a dashboard where I can see from every container the moment it is produced up until the moment it's delivered to a customer. How difficult can it be?
Mm-hmm.
I think I literally said this to the team. And then I was pushing it a bit for it, but I also realized after 2-3 weeks that it's an impossible question to ask. And then you need to change rapidly, because otherwise you get really stuck on answering that big question, while perhaps you should ask a smaller question first and then build a database.
Scope it down. Scope it down.
Yeah. Let me just look into the chat. Audience, please feel free to put all of your questions in the chat. Let me just take a look. We'll just send you a hello. And I think I see a hand, and I don't think I can see it directly. If there's anyone who would like to ask us directly a question, just unmute and ask your question. Okay, well, maybe a question to both of you. I know that, Remon, you talked about that you did some kind of like a daily stand-up meetings. I think it was like IDEX, IWEX or something like that. Maybe both of you, could you explain to us, okay, what type of meeting is it? And what's the difference between a regular meeting and the way you conducted these type of IDEX, IWEX meetings?
I can talk it more in general. And
Maybe you want to explain and then you take the example.
Then you make it specific for your context. So what you typically do in an IDEX meeting is not just asking how did your day went yesterday, but you ask the same question based upon data. So you look at data, what we call that transactional data, so lead time. So what was the lead time yesterday, of the different batches, whatever you produced. And based upon that data, you start having the conversation. So that means you need to have the lead time. You need to have the standard, the goal. So you can see, well, did I meet my standard, basically? And then you start having conversation about, did I meet my standard? Yes, okay. If not, let me understand, basically. And that conversation makes it much more content driven than just asking the question, how was your day yesterday? Because then you end up with a lot of stories and anecdotes and what have you. So what we have learned, that if you set it up in this way, again, you're going to learn much faster and much more than what you just do by asking a generic question. But that is basic, but you need to do it every day. And it should be a meeting of, let's say, 15, 20 minutes. So keep it short. Keep it short, very focused, and learn.
Yeah. Yeah, so I couldn't have answered it better, but indeed, it's about making sure that it's not a meeting where you share what happened, but that you really discuss the content. So, and what we try to do to make it also a bit practical, perhaps, is set a boundary for the amount of lead time we thought was necessary for every step down the chain. And every container that was out of that bandwidth, we discussed. And there, it's not about telling the story. No, it's really about, okay, but what is different between this container and the other container that was on time?
Exactly.
And indeed, by doing that, and this requires a lot of change, because people are, if you ask them a question, how was your day? You will get a lengthy answer and the meeting is over. So you every time need to go back, but what is different for that container compared to the rest? So really focusing on the dense as called.
Exactly. And again, this concept sounds very simple.
Yeah.
So you explain it in 2 minutes, but to really get it done is much more difficult, as you probably have experienced. It requires discipline. You need to be there. You need to have the data. You need to be willing to drill down to understand. So but once you get it and you really get it in your DNA, let's say, you start learning very fast.
Yeah. And as a last addition to that, it's a lot of dedication and sometimes asking the same question over and over again. But what I really saw with this project, as soon as the results are dripping in, you see that there is more enthusiasm about the meeting, because then they actually see that it's making their lives easier.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, very interesting. Hey, Remon, here we're talking about this IDEX, RX, but you shared also a lot of information with your peers. And one thing that we know is there when your data makes the supply chain transparent, everyone gets excited. So how did you manage the expectations of your peers? And how did you manage the derailers of your peers, like asking for different insights or adding requirements to your program or all these type of things?
Yeah. So it's a bit of two different questions in one. But to start with the last one on the derailers, I try to make sure, and also in our leadership team meetings, to go every time back to our purpose, why we wanted to do this. Yeah. And that was actually our joint goal. So if you first go back to the joint goal, then it's also easier if there is something derailing a bit to then bring that to the table instead of focusing on the fact that it's derailing. So start with your joint purpose and then bring someone on board instead of focus on that specific example. Yeah. And then to the first part of your question, so it's a bit difficult because you need to. Brave is perhaps a bit the wrong word, but you need to be. It needs to be inspiring enough that people want to do something different. So you should watch out that you don't overpromise. Yeah. But if you don't put the bar high enough, then it's really difficult to get everyone on board. So there you need to find the right balance between being bold in what you want to achieve, but in the same time understand a bit from your gut feel that it can be realistic if everyone puts the shoulders under it.
Yeah, so you gotta really believe in it.
Yeah.
So let me check one more time in the chat. I think we're almost at 6 o'clock. So with this, I would like to close our Q&A session, and I would like to close the webinar. I would like to thank our guests, Frank, Remon, and Ad-Willem. And also the guests online. Thank you for your participation in this webinar. We hope that you've had many takeaways and learnings in this session. And we also hope that it may jumpstart or improve your own supply chain transformation journey. For now, thank you all, and see you next time at an Argon Co event.